Good. Would you mind answering a couple of questions for me?
Sure, by all means.
Sure. Can I get your name first of all?
That's Adrian.
A-D-R-I-A-N?
A-D-R-I-A-N, that's right, yeah.
Okay. What do you do, Adrian?
I'm a web developer and an owner of a business, sign agency.
Awesome, Adrian. So, if you don't mind, just tell me why are you here tonight?
I'm here because I think that it's important to make a stand, to take a stand on stuff like this. I don't think it's ethical for people to support people who are facing very serious accusations like this. I think that the accusations are credible. And I think that people should stay home and not support it financially, essentially.
Okay, what do you think of the idea of innocent until proven guilty, due process and things like that? Do you think that plays a role here?
Well, I think that's a good question. What I would say is that I don't believe that courts are the ultimate arbiters of truth in our society. I think that the courts frequently convict people that we know are innocent and frequently find guilty people innocent as well, right? So really, I think that we can look, inside of our own hearts and make a decision about what we think is actually the truth and what's actually happening, and make up our own minds about that sort of thing, and not have to rely on a court of justice to determine that for us.
Okay. So, what do you make of the fact that, only until very recent, these accusations go back a number of decades.
Yep.
It's only in recent times that we've seen this avalanche of accusations come out against Cosby. Some would say there's a certain amount of opportunism there. What would you say to that?
Well, I think it's silly to think that people are going to make this stuff up, right? It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Who would want that sort of attention? It's a very difficult subject for people. It's very painful for people to recount these types of stories. I can't imagine that people would make that up for really no good reason. And I think sometimes, too, the culture's changing, right? I mean, if you go back decades ago, it was probably much harder to talk about these things, much harder to come out with this sort of thing. But I think as a society, we're starting to realize this is a real problem, and it's something we need to talk openly about, because it's the only way that we're going to put an end to this sort of thing.
Do you think that Cosby's guilty?
I believe the women that have told their stories.
That's a yes.
Yes, it is, yeah.
So as a result of tonight's protest, what would you like to see happen in the future?
Well, I mean, I don't know about the result of today's protest in particular, but I think in general what I want to see is society cease to tolerate these sorts of things. I want people to believe women and other survivors of abuse when they come forward with these stories. And I want us to sort of take an ethical stance and realize that the entertainers that we see on television are playing a role, they're playing a persona. We may have loved that role and loved that persona, but these are people who also have a private life, and when that private life is immoral or is wrong to others, when they hurt people, then we need to hold them to account for that and separate that from, the perhaps positive feelings we felt for their, television persona, essentially. Yeah.
One question. You said that when these kind of allegations are made, that you need to believe those that make them. You don't mean that in all circumstances. So, I mean, what would be a qualifier for this?
Well, I think that we need to use reasonable judgment, right? I mean, that's going to be different in every instance. But I think that we need to give people who come forward with these stories automatic credibility to some extent, because of the fact that I just don't think it's likely that most people make this sort of thing up. What I liken it to is if a friend or a loved one came to you and told you, this happened to me, someone did this to me, right? Would your automatic reaction be, well, I'm not really sure about that, that hasn't been proven in a court of law? Or would you say, oh my gosh, that's so terrible, what an outrageous thing that happened to you, right? But when we don't know these people personally, people start to put out all these judgments and, oh, maybe they're after money or whatever. I find that very hard to believe, right?
Well, just one more thing. I mean, that's an interesting point you raised. But if we were to apply that standard in a criminal court of law, I mean, you do realize that there would be no concept of actual justice, that it wouldn't work, right?
Well, I mean, I think we actually do apply that standard in a court of justice a lot, right? I mean, we call witnesses, but when witnesses say, tell a story, right? We give eyewitness testimony a very high level of credibility in a criminal justice case, right? So in fact, we're accustomed to believing stories that people tell in a court of law. Sometimes they're not true, whatever, right?
Adrian, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good process.
Thank you.
Culture's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Great culture's got to go!